Good evening, everyone. For those who may be visiting with us for the first time, my name is Father Mark, and I'm the pastor of this great parish here in Glastonbury, Saints Isidore and Maria, and it's fantastic seeing such a wonderful crowd come out tonight and having all of you here with us. I honestly can stand before you tonight and say I really don't know what to expect, because one of the fascinating things about human beings is that we always start first with our heads. And our heads want to logically map things out. And our heads want to tell us to address this, and this, and this, and use this to get to this point, and use this to get to that point. But then we're here not talking about our heads, we're here talking about God. And God happens here. When we open ourselves to hear, it changes what's going on here. And so we can plan and plan and plan, but then the reality of God's presence opens up on this deeper level of our soul. And so that's where we want to try to touch tonight, that deeper level of our soul, not our mind, our soul. So to bring us to this place more completely and to get ourselves in proper disposition, why don't we just relax for a bit, and we'll listen to our first selection tonight, which actually incorporates our title of Come As You Are.
Come out of sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken-hearted, let rescue begin. Come find your mercy, O sinner, come kneel. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your faces. O wanderer, come home, you're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. For the hopeless and all those who stray, come sit at the table, come taste the grace. There's rest for the weary, a rest that endures. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. O wanderer, come home, you're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are, come as you are, falling his arms, come has no sorrow, heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow, heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. O wanderer, come home, you're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. Come as you are. Come as you are. Come as you are.
So now take a moment to collect yourself a bit, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. Bring yourself here, your whole body, mind, and spirit and soul, and rest in that moment for a while. Feel free to close your eyes and create that sacred space within. There's something very powerful about moments. Each moment, if it's embraced, is the best. Each moment, when it's embraced, is where you can be right now. It's an opportunity for grace. We pray tonight with Saint Therese of Lisieux. May today there be peace within. May you trust that you are exactly where you are meant to be. May you not forget the infinite possibilities that are born of faith. May you use the gifts that you have received and pass on the love that has been given to you. May you be content with yourself, just the way you are. Let this knowledge settle into your bones and allow your soul the freedom to sing, dance, praise, and love. It is there for each and every one of us. As you look out on our world, we find very quickly that our world wants to direct our thinking. It wants to define our value. We're consistently bombarded with a sense of who we are and who we're supposed to be, of when human life is valuable and when it's expendable. There are many things that happen to us over which we really have no control. And sometimes we're just brought along on the tides of life. As we live in this world that wants to tell us who we are, we then begin to judge our value and our okayness based on those voices that we're hearing and what is telling us is acceptable or not. Imagine our younger people today and the messages that they're consistently hearing from social media and for all that is available to them. How complicated the process of self-discovery is today. How difficult it is in the midst of all of those voices to figure out who then I really am and what the true purpose and meaning of life is meant to be. People then judge us based on what they consider to be acceptable. And we can be very harshly judged in this world. We easily put people in boxes. We categorize them. And then once they're in a box, they're seen as less than the person they really are. We judge ourselves on appearances. I'm overweight. I'm gay. I'm conflicted with regard to my sexuality. I'm divorced. I'm getting old. I'm unable to physically keep up. I'm unpopular. I'm not engaging enough friends. I'm a loner. I'm not attractive. I'm terminally ill. I'm unemployed. I'm homeless. I'm dealing with addiction. I'm struggling with mental illness and depression. I've fallen into adultery and infidelity. I'm out of sync. How many of those boxes do we put people in? How do we categorize them? And how do we get out of the box? We tend to forget that underneath all of these created categories that we impose upon people, there is a person, an individual, a soul, a unique identity, who just like us is trying to put all of the pieces of life together and make sense of it all. It's no wonder then that in this conflicting and sometimes harsh world, we can easily convince ourselves that we're really not worthy of love. And in turn, we then become convinced we're not worthy or able to give it either. Henry Nouwen, in one of his books, The Life of the Beloved, which I'm referencing a little bit tonight, it's a nice little reflection if you want to pick up a copy of that at some point, Life of the Beloved. He says the voices going through his head, growing up and beyond, sounded something like this. Prove that you are worth something. Do something relevant, spectacular, or powerful, and then you will earn the love you so desire. Those tapes run through all of our minds at some point or another. If we're not worth something, in the way the world wants us to be worth something, then we're worth nothing. It's hard to stay on top of one's game. How does one succeed in this very complicated world? And so we walk around then with this feeling of not being able to measure up, not being able to put the pieces together, not being the person we really thought we could be or want to be. And that translates into this powerful feeling of embarrassment, or another word for that is shame. We feel embarrassed and shamed. How often do we find ourselves thinking that if people really knew what I am thinking, doing, saying, or believing, then there is no way they could accept or love me? Hence, we keep the cards that are playing out in our minds very close to our chests. And we're afraid to say what's on our minds. If people really knew. So what has happened over time? Because of our fear of the truth, of speaking it and receiving it, we've created this very toxic environment. And we basically walk around lying, because that's the easiest way to get through a situation without conflict. How are you today? Oh, I'm fine. Great. Thank you. My brain is saying I'm miserable. You like what I did to my hair? You think it looks a little better? Cut it a little shorter this week. Oh, sure, Father, it looks great. Did you see that haircut he got over there? The truth is very difficult for us to communicate, and those are silly examples, but there are times in our life where we need to speak up and say what's on our minds. But you know what? We're afraid to do that because we're afraid that if we do that, we're going to be rejected. And we're afraid of being rejected. We're so afraid of someone not liking us. So we keep our mouths shut. And so what this does is it brings us into this place of, oh, I can't say that, and then brings us to this place where we can't resolve conflict either. And so there's this undercurrent of conflict that pervades. And sometimes this has to do with how we see God. I don't think we really believe that God doesn't judge us. I think we honestly believe sometimes that every indiscretion or every wrongdoing we commit somehow nails Jesus to the cross again. That somehow God is taking each one of those transgressions and weeping bitterly over it. Whereas God doesn't work like that. And part of what we need to do if we're going to get unstuck and move away from how the world sees us to how God sees us is we have to correct how we understand God and bring it more in line with who God really is, not who we think God is. You know, embarrassment and shame and guilt are two different things. Two different things. You can look at the woman caught in adultery. We're all familiar with that story. Now, there's no way around it. The woman was caught in adultery. There's a commandment that says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." So there's no arguing the fact that she was guilty of breaking a commandment. That's pretty clear and straight. But what does need to be understood about that story to bring it in line with where Jesus was coming from? Well, those Pharisees that were gathered that were going to stone her were in essence putting her in a box. She herself was a victim of shame and embarrassment. She knew full well what she did, and it was eating her away, just like it does with us. When we do something that's wrong, it eats away at us. One of the biggest privileges of hearing confession is being able to receive that shame and guilt that someone brings and to have God transform it. And that's what Jesus did. Jesus went up to her and released her from the shame and guilt. He said, that stuff, no, that's not necessary. Don't carry that baggage. He took her out of the box and showed her to be the woman that she really was, the person underneath that she really was. And what happened? It freed her. And one hopes and one assumes that when she left as a new person. And so we all have a story to tell. The story of our lives as it unfolds for us. It's a story of success and failure, but it's also a story that involves God. And how does God fit into the story of our lives? Because sometimes I think the story that we listen to is the story the world wants us to listen to. But what story does God want us to hear? And how does God want us to understand ourselves? Those are the big questions. So tonight is really just one small part of other times I would like to be able to come together to continue discussions like today. Because these questions are big and they're not easy to answer, especially when you're looking for answers from your soul. So how do we put all of this together? How do we take the voices of the world and the voice of God and us and make sense out of all of that? How do we balance it out? Well, I think it starts by asking a huge question. And the question at first has an easy answer. But putting it into practice is where it doesn't get all that easy anymore. The question is this: why are we here? Not here tonight, but why are we here? Why are we at all? Because no one here tonight made the decision to be born. None of us. We weren't consulted. We weren't given a questionnaire of preferences. We didn't choose the time and place or the person to give us birth. We had no choice. And then at some point in our lives, we have to do something else over which we have no choice: die. Two things over which we have absolutely 100% no control. And so why are we here? The world, if you listen to those messages, is going to tell us that this human journey that we're living is just something that happened. It's random. And so why are we here? We're here just because. So make the best of the ride. Scoot around as much of the suffering and the hardship as you can. Rack up as many success points. Make as many friends. Make a lot of money. Get your big house, your big bank account, stock up for your future, because it's all about you. And if you listen to the advertising that is out there, if you listen to the messages that are out there, they all reinforce that agenda, every last single one of them. Because they're all going to tell you, when this doesn't work anymore, you throw it out, and you get another one. Well, you know what the problem is with that? When I stop working, then you throw it out. And this is what we do with human life. My parts stop working, throw it out. It's no longer any good. Don't waste taxpayer money by putting me in a convalescent home. Don't sustain my life. Don't do anything more because I don't work anymore. So throw me out. Oh, you're going to give birth to a baby, but it's deformed. Throw it out. Try again. Maybe you'll get a better one the next time. This is what the world teaches us. The messages are there. The messages are there, and we can't deny them. We can't deny them. And so is that why we're here, just because? If that's the answer we bring, then where do we find hope other than in what I can bring to my life myself? What defines my purpose other than what I can create for myself? What gives me meaning other than what I can create for myself? Well, if a person is lost and a person doesn't know why they're here, it's no wonder why they're walking around the world depressed, angry, lost, confused, and unsettled. In order for your boat to stay where it is, you need a firm anchor. Is the world going to give us that firm anchor? Enter God. Getting a firm grip on the God answer to this question of why are we here is going to then determine how we process embarrassment and shame and all of the feelings that we have, and whether we even can come close to understanding what happiness is all about. Because happiness isn't found in what I can get the next time I go to the store, or what I can click online, or how many friends I can have on Facebook. It has nothing to do with that. And so what do we believe about God? Well, if I'm not here just because, then I'm here because. And that changes everything up. It takes a leap of faith to answer that question, but then offers profound possibilities when we give the right answer. I'm here because. In Henry Nouwen's book, Life of the Beloved, The because is that we are the beloved of God, that we're chosen. Now think about yourself, with all of the barnacles and warts and idiosyncrasies and failures and all of those things that go on in our minds and in our hearts. Think of yourself now in terms of a God who chose you, not accepted you, tolerated you, adopted you, chose you. Out of all of the possibilities, you were created. You were created. I was created. If we begin to understand ourselves as beloved and chosen, then life begins to burst a bit. And we have a new way of thinking about ourselves and thinking about the bigger picture of life. And we can begin to move away from this world that wants to consistently pull us into self-doubt, low self-esteem, self-rejection, and depression. Because we can easily be manipulated and used by those powers, and they can weigh us down. But God's not going to force himself on us. And see, this is where the next piece comes. Our brains can make perfect sense out of being here because. Our brains can understand being chosen. Our brains, as I'm saying that to you, like that idea that my essence, my being, is on purpose, by design, out of love, and that I am beloved. But how do we get our soul to catch up with our brain? How does that mental thought take on flesh and become real? When does God move from our idea to a lived reality? That's the challenge. Let's pause there and listen to our next selection. God is in the story.
There's torn up pages in this book, words that tell me I'm no good, chapters that define me for so long. But the hands of grace and endless love dusted off and picked me up, told me that my hope is never gone. God is in this story. God is in the details. Even in the broken parts, he holds my heart. He never fails. When I'm at my weakest, I will trust in Jesus. Always in the highs and lows, the one who goes before me. God is in this story.
So we've that storm you're breaking through. Feels like it's too much on you. Wonder if he even cares at all. Well, hold on tight to what you know. He promised he won't let you go. Your song still heals the written in his scars.
God is in this story. God is in the details. Even in the broken parts, he holds my heart. He never fails. When I'm at my weakest, I will trust in Jesus. Always in the highs and lows, the one who goes before me. God is in this story. If it reads like addiction, if it reads like disease, he's the one who frees the prisoner. He's the healer of all things. If it reads like depression, if it reads broken heart, he's the one who holds your sorrow.
He won't leave you here alone.
God is in this story. God is in the details. Even in the broken parts, he holds my heart. He never fails. When I'm on my knees, I will trust in Jesus. Always in the highs and lows, the one who goes before me. Always in the highs and lows, the one who goes before me. God is in this story.
You're in this story,
God is in my story.
right here in my story.
So then one of the biggest questions people can ask, and it's a valuable question and valid, so then show me your God. You're telling me we are here on purpose, that we're blessed, that our lives have meaning, and that I've been created out of love. Well then, show me this God so that I too can believe in him. That's the difficult part. You see, it's easy for our brains to think about the idea of God. In fact, we've made great strides with even blending science and faith together so we can have intelligent conversations about how all of those disciplines can intersect and even live with one another. But it's the business of the soul that needs to embrace, comprehend, and welcome this presence of God. Once we begin to look at our lives through this bigger lens, then we begin to really immerse ourselves in life. And when we immerse ourselves in life, and we create some quiet space for ourselves to really ponder and encounter, we begin to see that there is something going on in here that is not of my doing. The very fact and stuff of life has a presence to it. Even animals, birds, squirrels, they have a presence. We have a presence. We're not just an entity. This has no presence. But created life has presence. It has breath. And that life is only possible because of God. I love the Psalms. And I'd like to read a piece of Psalm 42 to you tonight. So ultimately, as a person who accepts the idea of God, now we have our soul that wants to meet God. Psalm 42. As the hind longs for running waters, so my soul longs for you, O God. Athirst is my soul for God, the living God. Pausing a minute. So once we recognize that God is God, now we want to discover God. And once we take that leap of discovering, we realize our thirst. We want to know. We need to know. The psalmist continues, when shall I go and behold the face of God? When? When? My tears are my food day and night, as they say to me day after day, where is your God? Those times I recall now that I pour out my soul within me. When I went with the throng and led them in procession to the house of God, amid loud cries of joy and thanksgiving with the multitude keeping festival. Why are you so downcast, O my soul? Why sigh within me? Hope in God, for I shall again be thanking him in the presence of my Savior and my God. Within me, my soul is downcast. Hope in God. And so the fuel behind the faith of this psalmist is in hope. Hope. And so we're not always going to see the face of God, perhaps not even in this life, but we walk in hope. And the psalmist said, what gives credence to his life and what lifts up his heart is this hope. And you can touch that yourself once you begin to open your heart to God, to realize that his presence is within you. While you may not be able to always touch it or feel it or understand it, the hope you place in it changes you. It changes you. And it begins to anchor you. And it begins to focus you. And it begins to bring you to a place of peace. One more. St. Anselm. St. Anselm had a keen sense of what I'm talking about. Now, as a saint, you would expect that he probably had some face-to-face vision of God. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about an individual who did precisely what I'm describing to you. Opened himself to the presence of God and allowed hope to then fill his heart and him to move on one step at a time and go forward, walking in this hope. Listen to what he says. I think it's beautiful. You may not agree, but I do. My soul, have you found what you are looking for? You are looking for God, and you have discovered that he is the supreme being, your brain, and that you could not possibly imagine anything more perfect. Our brains can do that. You have discovered this supreme being is life itself, light, wisdom, goodness, eternal blessedness, and blessed eternity. He equates all those things with God. That supreme being is life itself. We know, we can feel that. Light, we know what that is. Wisdom, we know how that works. Goodness, we know its power. Eternal blessedness, we know our desire to be at peace. And we know blessed eternity, the endlessness of life. We know all those things. We can feel those things in our soul. He says, that's the supreme being. That's God. Lord, my God, you gave me life and restored it when I lost it. Tell my soul that so longs for you what else you are besides what it has already understood, so that it may see you clearly. It stands on tiptoe to see more, but apart from what it has already seen, it sees nothing but darkness. Isn't that our experience sometimes, that we see nothing but darkness? That's okay. Of course, it does not really see darkness, because there is no darkness in you. But it sees that it can see no further because of the darkness in itself. Surely, Lord, inaccessible light is your dwelling place, for no one apart from yourself can enter into it and fully comprehend you. If I fail to see this light, it is simply because it is too bright for me. Still, it is by this light that I do see all that I can see, even as weak eyes, unable to look straight at the sun, see all that they can by its sun's light. Think about that. If we look directly into the sun, our eyes are blinded. But yet, we can see all that the sun illuminates by its light. That's how hope in God works. That once we take that leap of faith and begin to walk in hope, then we begin to see all those rays of light that God sheds, that are reflections of his power, reflections of his glory, while still unable to look and see him face to face. Make sense? The light in which you dwell, Lord, is beyond my understanding. It is so brilliant that I cannot bear it. I cannot turn my mind's eye toward it for any length of time. I am dazzled by its brightness, amazed by its grandeur, overwhelmed by its immensity, and bewildered by its abundance. O supreme and inaccessible light, O complete and blessed truth, how far you are from me, the saint says, even though I am so near to you. How remote you are from my sight, even though I am present to yours. And there's a moment of prayer. When in our soul and we are in the presence of God, we begin to realize that in my sight I am far away from God, but in God's sight I am close to him, resting on his shoulder. It's a powerful image. You are everywhere in your entirety, and yet I do not see you. In you I move, and I have my being, faith, and yet I cannot approach you. You are within me and around me, and yet I do not perceive you. O God, let me know you and love you so that I may find my joy in you. There's the byproduct of prayer. Once we begin to live in hope, once we begin to place ourselves in the presence of this incomprehensible, somewhat inaccessible God, we then begin to experience hope. Hope. And joy. If I cannot do so fully in this life, let me at least make some progress every day until at last that knowledge, love, and joy come to me in all their plenitude. While I am here on earth, let me learn to know you better, so that in heaven I may know you fully. Let my love for you grow deeper here, so that there I may love you fully. On earth, then I shall have great joy in hope, and in heaven complete joy in the fulfillment of my hope. O Lord, through your Son you command us to, you counsel us to ask, and you promise that you will hear us so that our joy may be complete. Lord, I am making the request that you urge us to make through your wonder counselor. Give me then what you promise to give through your truth. You, O God, are faithful. Grant that I may receive my request, so that my joy may be complete. So it's walking in hope. Acknowledging in faith that God is the author of my life. I'm beloved. I've been made on purpose, with intent, as I find myself to be, no differently. And then to be able to love the author of that blessing deep within my soul. I may not be able to see him face to face. I may not be able to put him in a box to show someone else. But the hope of embracing him one day then begins to change me. And I begin to experience a deeper joy. I begin to see the light of God's presence dancing around me as the sun illuminates the things of earth. And then that desire begins to increase, and that longing begins to increase. And I realize what my heart really needs and what my soul really is thirsting for, and it's to have that for all eternity. But you see, the problem is that we can't find this in the internet. It's not an exercise of the mind. But the world only knows the mind. And unless it accepts faith, we'll never know its soul. Meister Eckhart, another great spiritual author, has so much to say about the soul. You know, I've often said myself, I finally came to realize the soul, our soul, is timeless. And I've mentioned this before. Our bodies know time. We age. The parts wear out. We know that time flies by. We lose our spouse. Life changes. We find ourselves not being able to do what we one day could do. And so we know time very well and how it creeps up on us, how quickly it goes by. But when we think about our soul's not subject to time. It really isn't. That's why there's this part of us. When it comes out, we allow it out every once in a while. That is still a young kid who still remembers and wants the joyfulness and the innocence of youth, who still can run for that ice cream truck to get an ice cream cone on a hot day, that still wants to laugh and have reckless fun, to discover and to grow and to learn and to do all those things. That person lives within because it's found now in the wisdom of our soul that knows no time. So that's why when we leave this life and go to the timelessness of eternity, it's a perfect fit. And why we desire it so much, because that's the part of us that we want to truly live forever. So Meister Eckhart says that when we listen to our soul, and this is probably why we sometimes get confused, our brains think, our brains process, our souls experience. And so when we listen to our soul, and I'm using that word in quotes, we're not going to hear something like our ears hear, but we're going to experience something. And the experience is something that we're not very used to and not something we're very comfortable with. And it's called silence. Silence. Meister Eckhart tells us that at the core of every human being, where our soul is, we have all this busyness, all this stuff going on in our brains, all of this activity going on, all of this stimulation, but in the core of who we are, it is absolutely 100% silent. In a way we can't even imagine silence. And the only person that can get in there and break that silence is God. No one else. That's why I truly believe with my whole heart, mind, and soul in the presence, the full presence of Christ in the Eucharist. Because when you begin to think about it, that's the only way the physical presence of God can get within. It's a powerful image that we're bringing God into his home, here, in his home. So in continuing on that, Meister Eckhart says, sometimes in prayer, we see God as a candle. Now that we have kind of touched a bit how we can make real this experience of God, let's turn to our third song tonight and read into that.
In Christ alone my hope is found. Here is my light, my strength, my song. This cornerstone, this solid ground, firm through the fiercest drought and storm. What heights of love, what depths of peace, when fears are stilled, when striving cease, my comforter, my all in all, here in the love of Christ I stand.
In Christ alive, who took on flesh, fullness of God in helpless babe, this gift of love and righteousness, scorned by the ones he came to save, till on that cross as Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. For every sin on him was laid. Here in the death of Christ I stand.
bursting forth in glorious day. Up from the grave he rose again, and as he stands in victory, since curse has lost its grip on me, for I am his, and he is mine, brought in the precious blood of Christ. No guilt in life, no fear in death. This is the power of Christ in me. For his first cry to final breath, Jesus commands my destiny. No power of hell, no scheme of man can ever pluck me from his hand, till he returns or calls me home. Here in the power of Christ I'll stand.
So if we begin to rethink who God is and how God presents himself in our lives, then it's going to change up our habits of prayer a little bit. It's going to change how we approach the divine presence and what we see as the goal and the object of prayer. So if prayer then is this leap of faith, falling into the presence of God, who has created and fashioned me into the person that I know myself to be, who has breathed life into my soul, who is in many ways inaccessible to me, but yet accessible, that I access through this virtue of hope, which would then bring me joy, then the goal of my prayer is going to be to trust in that presence and that power in increasing fashion, that is what I'm going to pray for. And Meister Eckhart says, if we find ourselves praying for other things, then we're really not praying for God. That there's a problem with that, because we're using God to get what we really want, when what we really need is what we're finding in that hope-filled space of prayer. And he says, we're using God like a candle. So you use a candle to find something in the darkness, and once you find what you're looking for, what do? You blow the candle out and you throw it away. I don't need that anymore, until I got to find the next thing. So then you get the God candle again, and you carry that into that dark space, and when you get what you want, you blow it out, and you throw that out, and you go again to the other. So we keep this process going. And it's almost like God is our pet little animal that's going to get us what we need, and then we can move on. Where what we really need is God. And as we begin to realize that, we begin to realize, as God has me in his care, he's got you and you and you and you and everyone else in that same loving embrace. And as our last song just reminded us, what's there to fear? If life ends tomorrow, Who cares? It doesn't end. So why is that such a problem? Psalm 139, it's one of my favorites. Truly, you have formed my inmost being. You knit me in my mother's womb. I give you thanks that I am fearfully, wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul also you knew full well, nor was my frame unknown to you. When I was made in secret, when I was fashioned in the depth of the earth, your eyes have seen my actions. In your book, they are all written. My days were limited before one of them existed. How weighty are your designs, O God. How vast the sum of them. God is the one who first saw us. Only God truly knows us. There's much more that we can discuss, and perhaps we can leave that for the next time that we get together. But in summary, I think as a world, we really have to be careful about those boxes. There's so much about human life that we don't understand yet. So many things to be encountered, so many things to be understood. We can't just railroad over people because they're in a box that we put them in. You know, every one of us experiences some measure of suffering or pain. You can't go through life without it. And so we have to be more gentle with one another because we all carry our pain within. And sometimes the way we listen, or should I say not listen to one another, it's as if what we're feeling really doesn't matter. You know, as we listen to the stories of people, those stories are their stories. They're not our stories. You know, when someone says to me, I'm grieving, their experience of grief is not my experience of grief. And we have to let people tell their story of grief. Can't railroad over it. Their pain is their pain, and it needs to be shared. The worst thing we can do is to compare it with our own, or make the silly assumption that they just need to get over it. Get over it. Move on. The person is telling you they can't. Listen. If they tell you, I just lost my mother. Oh, that happened to me too, you know, and it's the hardest thing. You've just canceled them out and told them that your pain is better and more important than theirs. Oh, you're sad? It doesn't belong in the workplace. Leave it home. Leave it home. I feel the way you do too, but I don't bring it here. What have we done? What have we done? And then it's those toxic relationships that, because we're so afraid to tell the truth, so afraid to be vulnerable, because, we're not used to resolving conflicts in healthy ways. And so, there's a price. If I open my mouth and I tell you exactly what I think, you may not like me. And that's what's sad, that we can't listen to what others are really saying about us. We have such a hard time dealing with criticism, such a hard time listening to how others really perceive us. Maybe if we did, we'd in the end be a little happier. And so we have to be kinder and more gentle with one another, less quick to dismiss people, to turn our backs, to end relationships, to sever ties. It all gets so toxic. I think that's part of the wisdom, maybe the wisdom, that Jesus brought to that thing we find so difficult, forgiveness. He said, forgive, not once, not twice, but all the time. He said, turn that cheek. Forgive your enemy. Not us, though. Sever the relationship. Draw the line in the sand. Break the ties. Hold the grudge. Take up the sword. Get violent. I think he knew that forgiveness was the only way to clear up the toxicity of our lives and to bring us to a place where we can truly love and accept one another. It really is all that simple, but it seems to be one of the hardest things for us to do. I'm not sure why. But in the end, try bringing hope into your life of prayer. You take that leap of faith, you begin to hope in God's promises. You will find that your joy increases, your faith increases, and your love will increase. And then people won't have to worry about asking you, where is your God? They will see it. So let us now stand for a final blessing. And now, bow your heads. And may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you peace. And may our God of compassion and mercy now bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Be at peace. I have to just take a moment and thank David and our wonderful instrumentalist tonight. Really wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming, and may God be with you and bless you.